listening to Diasporic Music on Black Power 96 with Melinda Francis. Norman Richmond and Lisa Watson is on the buttons and joining us. Well, we just completed our tribute to Sam Cooke out of Clarksville, Mississippi, and we also spoke with Charles Wright. Yeah, we spoke to Charles Wright, and joining us on the line is Dr. Gerald Horne. Dr. Gerald Horne has a brand spanking new book called African Americans and a new take on U.S. history. And we're still going through the great book, looks like a great book, Armed Struggle, ? Panthers and Communists, Black Nationalists and Liberals in Southern California through the 60s and 70s. And that is a must read for people around the world, really. And Dr. Horne, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm fine. You interviewed Charles Wright of the Watts Hunters Third Street Band?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, that's historic, man. Make sure
he was on all the records that I recorded.
Oh, that's historic. Make sure that that's circulated widely.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
But
he's working on his second book.
Say that again?
He just wrote his second book.
He's writing his second book.
Oh, good for him. Good for him. But if you don't mind, I'd like to begin with a music quiz. And I'm going to play a few seconds from a cut. Your assignment, if you choose to accept it, is to identify what the cut is, but more importantly, identify what this has to do with Canada and with Chrystia Freeland, who may be your next prime minister in particular. Do you accept the assignment?
Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay, here we go.
15.
Okay, it's on you.
That's you, Norman.
As Vladimir Ilyich Lenin once said, only Allah knows. I have no idea.
Oh, okay. So that's Mtume. I'll have you make a comeback by telling the audience who Mtume is and his iconic cut.
Oh,
you, me, and he.
You want me to? What? Oh my. Mtume was a good friend of Larry Hammond. Mtume was a member of Ron Karenga's US organization. Yeah, Mtume was oh my God, his biggest thing is Juicy Fruit, which you sample Biggie Small.
Right, and of course he played with everybody from Miles Davis on down.
Yeah, also he was the son of Jimmy Heath. All the Heath brothers, Mtume, I think their roots are in North Carolina, I believe, and come through Philly. And Jimmy Heath was a great alto sax. Didn't they call him Little Bird or something like that? Junior Bird, Bird Junior, something to that effect.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I guess the audience now wants to know, what does this have to do with Canada and with Chrystia Freeland? Let me share my thoughts. Canada, there's a line in this song, You, Me, and He. The line is, we're living a lie. And I think that Canada, and particularly Chrystia Freeland, have been living a lie, being junior partners of world imperialism led by US imperialism. It reminds me of a scene from another cultural artifact that the audience should become familiar with. I'm thinking of the Oscar-winning movie Missing, starring Jack Lemmon. The story is about the post-1973 situation in Chile after the fascist coup. Jack Lemmon, a prosperous U.S. businessman, comes to this South American country searching for his son. He meets with figures from the U.S. Embassy who instruct him that the kind of fascism that's descending in South America is ultimately being done for his benefit, so he can live a prosperous life. Now, of course, you can quarrel with that, but in some ways, what he was illustrating is what I'm suggesting with regard to Canada. That is to say, being a junior partner of US imperialism has been beneficial to some might argue to many in Canada, but starting tomorrow with the inauguration of Mr. Trump, there's a new sheriff in town. And Mr. Trump is demanding that Canadians pay more into the US Treasury. Otherwise, they will lose whatever benefits they thought they may have gained from being associated with US imperialism. And I've talked a number of times in recent days about the situation in the Sahel, where you've had executives from Canadian mining companies who've been detained by the regimes there, and their companies being forced to cough up millions to the treasuries of these African countries. Otherwise, they'll be detained indefinitely. And of course, they coughed up the millions because I guess Canada no longer feels that it can rely upon the muscle of US imperialism to stop that sort of thing from happening. And then the question is, what will Canada do now that there's this new sheriff in town? And which brings me to Chrystia Freeland, who may become the next prime minister of Canada. If that happens, I think that Canada is basically saying that they would prefer to continue living the lie, to quote Ntume, not least because Chrystia Freeland, as you know more than most, she is connected to a neo-fascist family in Ukraine, and of course has been a driving force behind Ottawa's support to neo-fascism in Canada. In other words, out of one side of her mouth, Chrystia Freeland is supporting Liberal Party policy, including the public option in terms of health care, other social welfare benefits that many Canadians enjoy. But on the other side of her mouth, she's backing neo-fascism, which ultimately has boomeranged, has played a role in delivering to power this new sheriff, the Tangerine Tyrant in Washington, D.C., inaugurated tomorrow, January 20th, creating enormous contradictions and problems for Canada. I don't get the sense, as I've said many times before, even on the left, that there's a full awareness of what's in store. I don't get the idea that the elite in Canada, in particular, the ruling class, recognizes that they really need a dramatic alteration of policy. The only policy that I've heard bruited that may be diverging from previous praxis is this idea of Canada joining the European Union. I, of course, would argue that Canada, sooner rather than later, needs to improve relations with Russia, China, and India. But in any case, let me throw the microphone back to you.
Well, I think that there is one of the whole question of the new sheriff in town. I'm looking for, she's in Alberta. Her last name is Daniels. I'm having a senior moment. She has went to Mar-a-Lago and met with Donald Trump, and I shouldn't say theoretically, but everybody with the exception of Ms. Daniels claims to not want to support the new sheriff in town because they basically are saying that the new sheriff in town is they need, I wouldn't say 50-50, but they need us. America needs us just as much as we need them. Like I say, the real is Ms. Daniels out of Alberta. I know you've been following her situation, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I've been musing that it might be Alberta that becomes the 51st state, not Canada as a whole, which would be quite dangerous, needless to say, to Canadian national unity. It'll probably lead to a resurgence of a similar movement in Quebec, for example, but that movement leading to independence. These are all prospects that are possible, but once again, I don't get the idea north of the border that all of these gargantuan changes that I've just laid out may be in store. With regard to U.S. imperialism, however, I think that I think U.S. imperialism is making a very profound error. That is to say that obviously these threats to Canada, to Denmark, Greenland, to Panama, it reflects weakness. U.S. imperialism feels it needs to bulk up in order to confront the challenge from China. The contradiction is that it also needs to have alliances, as the Biden wing of the ruling class has acknowledged. Mr. Trump apparently is going to try to blow up these alliances with the riverboat gamble that he can twist the arm of Canada to either pay more into the U.S. Treasury or alternatively to even become the 51st state. And I think that's a very serious, perhaps misguided gamble. Obviously, it opens all sorts of opportunities for the movement in the United States of America. The problem there is that many in our movement, they not only don't have an international analysis, they don't even know that they're supposed to have an international analysis. So, which opens the door for, if Mr. Trump's misguided plans with regard to territorial aggrandizement, if those plans fail, or alternatively, if Canada is not willing or able to pay more into the U.S. Treasury, then more will be taken out of the hide of the working class and the poor of the United States of America. And I'm afraid to say that whatever scenario unfolds, that latter scenario is quite likely.
Well, Doug Ford, who is the Premier of Ontario, has been speaking very harshly about this 51st state situation. And the person that I was thinking about was Ms. Daniels out of Alberta. Like I will reiterate, she is basically Daniela Smith, and she is basically on Trump's side, and she is trying to go along with the program, and she's getting a lot of I don't know how much heat. First of all, I think I asked you this last week, but can Trump actually do what he's doing without going through? Can he just do this on his own, or does this have to go through Congress, the Senate, or can he just does he have carte blanche to do what, or is he just selling wolf tickets, as they say?
All of the above. I mean, first of all, there are certain actions he can take through the stroke of a pen, his pen. There are certain actions that require action by Congress. There are certain actions that can be challenged in the courts. However, J.D. Vance, the incoming vice president, has made it clear that if there are court decisions they don't like, they'll ignore them. That's part of the new situation that we're facing in the United States of America. All of this propaganda and poppycock and balderdash about liberal democracy, rules-based international order, the rules-based domestic order, all of that's headed for the dustbin. I mean, they attempted a neo-fascist coup January 6, 2021. Now, of course, we're on a fast track to neo-fascism, blessed by almost 80 million. And there again is a tale, because as I've been talking myself hoarse about on various platforms, many of our friends on the left, they find it hard to accept what's happening. And so they tell themselves that the 80 million actually are social democrats. They're basically class-based warriors who are taking a detour. They don't want to admit the history of the United States as it led up to this point, that includes genocide against the indigenous, mass enslavement of the Africans. Instead, they talk about incomplete bourgeois democracy and all of this other rationalizations for what is amounting to neo-fascism.
Mm-hmm.
And our Canadian friends have not helped us, I'm afraid to say.
I just have like one point that's just like, so I came, I grew up with the whole free trade, like multiple agreements. On that front, like, how could even Trump do this? And my question is with the, on the Canadian side, how nobody's talking about these agreements that we have with the U.S. and we're not even talking about it.
Hey, talk to the Native Americans about making agreements and treaties with the Yankees.
Treaties, yeah.
I mean,
the problem with the Canadians too, so yeah.
Right. I mean, as a matter of fact, as I've been saying, and I'm going to be writing this in my first book of 2026, The Counter-Revolution of 1893, the Hawaii coup and the roots of U.S. imperialism in the Asia Pacific, that part of the problem with the United States is that those who conquered this section of the continent, they feel that the praxis that allowed them to do so, for example, writing treaties, signing treaties, and then ignoring them, that's what they should do internationally, basically. That's what they did with Hawaii, and apparently that's what they plan to do with Canada.
So it's really 21st century gangsterism, it sounds like to me.
Oh, for sure. And of course, you keep opening doors, Norman. One definition amongst many of capitalism and imperialism are organized crime. And guess what? What has been a major force in multiple industries? Of course, you can look at my book on the film industry to get a hint of what my book on jazz, my book on boxing. It's organized crime. I mean, this is what capitalism has amounted to a certain degree. And I don't get the sense that our friends north of the border have a clue, have a hint about what's in store beginning tomorrow.
Well, Jagmeet Singh, and I haven't heard a word from the Canadian Communist Party, and the leader of the Canadian Communist Party, I think Liz Hill. I think the newspaper they used to. I haven't gotten around, so I shouldn't. It should not be a criticism, but in a lot of the libraries, the newspaper they had a pretty good distribution. Of course, everything is on online, but I guess I have to be self-critical of myself because I haven't really followed them online like I should. But Jagmeet Singh is definitely. Wouldn't you say Jagmeet Singh is not stepping up to the plate, Melinda?
Of course, you're referring to the leader of the opposition, Social Democratic
of the New Democratic Party, yeah.
Which of
I'm
course,
sorry. I was talking and I was on mute. Yeah, no, he hasn't been speaking up since this new coalition government. He hasn't been speaking up. So yeah, I don't expect anything coming out. He's only spoken up when it's beneficial for the coalition government, to be honest. So, and yeah, I had this discussion with my father the other day, and he did a little 1-2 with the dental and the pharmaceuticals, but I mean, he should have been speaking up the whole time. That's always my criticism. The NDP, they kind of disappear, and yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Well, I can tell you already, to speak concretely, that the medical industrial complex in the United States is salivating at the prospect of an invasion of Canada and wrecking your healthcare system and imposing and implanting the kind of pay or die system of healthcare that you have in the United States of America, where families go bankrupt and go into spectacular debt if they have what may amount to a minor health issue. This is what's in store. And the fact that Chrystia Freeland of the Liberal Party can be considered a serious candidate to become the next prime minister, or I should say the next leader of the Liberal Party. If I were Canadian right now, I would be thinking of migrating. In fact, I'd be looking at websites for New Zealand, for example, or Namibia, for example. But in any case, we shouldn't spend the whole time speaking about Canada, as important as it is, given all the other news in the world, particularly this new agreement between Russia and Iran. Very significant, very profound, particularly since we know that with Mr. Netanyahu being forced to sign this agreement with Hamas, part of the reason that he signed it is because he does not want to unduly alienate the new sheriff in town, feeling that Mr. Trump will assist in a further and future attack on Iran. But that possibility has been reduced with this new agreement with Russia and Iran, because in some ways, this is a mutual defense pact. Actually, if you look at the pact, it covers the waterfront, everything from culture to defense. Speaking of this agreement with Hamas, the Israeli right is up in arms, but they really have nowhere to go because they are wholly dependent as of now on Mr. Trump and his whims. But if you monitor Israeli media, it opens up opportunities for the progressive movement in this country if, as I said, the progressive movement is capable of absorbing lessons from abroad. What I mean is, Caroline Glick, and I monitor her program so you don't have to. Naturally, she's an Israeli who talks with a thick US accent. She's been blowing the whistle on Steve Witkoff, who's Mr. Trump's main negotiator, who knocked heads together in Israel, particularly the head of Mr. Netanyahu, to get him to sign this agreement. She says, and she was displaying receipts that I have not scrutinized, admittedly, that Mr. Witkoff has been a business partner of the Qatari Sovereign Wealth Fund. The Qataris, as you know, control Al Jazeera. They're very close to the Turks. They have been in odds historically with the Saudis. She says that Mr. Witkoff, a real estate speculator like Mr. Trump, had a white elephant on his hands in Manhattan, and that the Qataris took it off his hands for a cool $623 million. And that there are other kinds of conflicts of interest, she says, that make some of these recent maneuvers by the Trump team in that part of the world quite suspect. I think if you step back for a second and you understand the transactional nature of Mr. Trump and his team, it would be a useful exercise to add up the gross domestic product of many of the Arab states, starting with Qatar, and perhaps even including their antagonist, Saudi Arabia, perhaps the United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, etc., and then put on the other side of the ledger the GDP of Israel. And even if you combine the wealth of Zionist backers in the United States of Israel, including Miriam Adelson, the casino magnate, who, by the way, like Elon Musk, is in bed with China, and figuratively, of course, and others of that ilk. The former, speaking of the Arabs, they outnumber the latter, speaking of the Zionists, in terms of wealth. And even though the Arabs have not stepped up to the plate, speaking of the Saudis in particular, in terms of being more forthright in defense of the Palestinians, I think that Mr. Trump, in terms of cutting business deals, may at some point feel that Israel is creating more problems than benefits and assets, particularly when U.S. imperialism wants to focus on China, but keeps getting bogged down in West Asia, not least because of Israeli expansionism. This is going to be a very intriguing next few months, minimally, with regard to U.S. foreign policy vis-a-vis West Asia, vis-a-vis Iran, vis-a-vis Russia and China.
We only have we have about 5 minutes left, and I don't want to interrupt your flow, but it was just announced that President Joe Biden, has pardoned Marcus Mosiah Garvey. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, better late than never. It's just like Mr. Biden going out of the door. He removed Cuba from the terrorism list. Marcus Mosiah Garvey, of course, well known to this audience, I'm sure, roots in Jamaica, born in 1887, as I recall, perishing in London in 1940, as I recall, in between building the Universal Negro Improvement Association. You may want to go online to the Activist News Network and see some of the interviews I've done with a number of Garvey scholars, including Robert Hill of UCLA, including Eric McDuffie, University of Illinois, in his recent book, The Second Battle for Africa, on the Garvey movement, in a sense, post-Garvey, post-1940. There are others as well. But in any case, I'm sure there'll be dancing in the streets in Jamaica, and to a degree, dancing in the streets in Toronto.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I was speaking to Charles Wright a few minutes ago, and he said his analysis was it was a day late and a dollar short. He's a little late on it.
Well, better late than never.
Do we want to, before we run out of time, do we want to talk about your new book, like a summary?
Oh, sure. It's the one that Norman mentioned at the top, African Americans in the New History of the United States of America. As a lawyer friend described it, it's, pardon the expression, a kind of Horne book, which is a term of art from the legal profession. It's a summary of many of the books that I've written in recent decades, starting with the late 15th century, coming all the way up to the present, dealing with a number of fundamental points. For example, the opening deals in part, in no small measure, with the identity politics of whiteness, which is quite intriguing because those who are defined as, quote, white, unquote, oftentimes throw that descriptor, identity politics, at everyone except themselves. It's like the thief yelling, "Stop thief!" for example. And I deal with how internationalism has been a saving grace for people of African descent in particular, given the adverse correlation of forces we faced in North America. I deal with our alliances historically with the Haitian Revolution, with indigenous groupings in Florida, with Mexico at the time of the secession of the former Mexican province of Tejas or Texas, about 180 odd years ago from Mexico so that they can continue slavery. Our alliance with the Bolshevik Revolution and communist parties. I don't have a chapter in this book, although you can find it all over the place, particularly in my book, Race War, about how the Black nationalists aligned with Japan. Some years ago, that was a major theme of my writing and research. And in fact, in my first book of 2026, aforementioned, The Counter-Revolution of 1893, the White Coup and the Roots of U.S. Imperialism in the Asia Pacific, I will take up that theme once again of Black nationalists and Japan.
I wanted to say that I was reading Jan Carew, and Jan Carew talked about how that African people's alliance with Japan, even I shouldn't say just African people, but people in Guyana's Indians, Africans, Amerindians, so on and so forth. There was a huge movement in support of Japan in Guyana during that particular time.
That doesn't surprise me at all. And in fact, just for the sake of getting research tips and notes from your audience, in addition to the book I just mentioned on Hawaii, the Asia Pacific, my second book of 2026 will be White Supremacy in Africa, ? The Roots of U.S. Imperialism in Egypt, the quote unquote Muslim world, and Ethiopia. It tracks that relationship from the beginning of the 19th century through the celebrated Egyptian leader Muhammad Ali, no, not the boxer, the Egyptian leader, all the way through Confederate soldiers helping Egypt invade Ethiopia post-US Civil War, through Russia coming to the defense of Ethiopia when it's invaded by the Italians in the late 19th century, all the way up to the rise of Nasser post-World War II. Any research tips?
The last thing is good. Okay. The last thing is Ethiopia is split between Islam, Christianity, and I guess the traditional African religions. Am I correct in saying that?
Sure, and that's played a major role in the history. Maybe at another point, I can go into the current relations between Egypt and the Horn of Africa, which are complicated, complex. As a matter of fact, one of the things we're going to have to watch out for is that Israel feels that it might have blundered by bringing into power in Damascus, Syria, rebranded ISIS and rebranded Al-Qaeda. Those they call, quote, Sunni extremists, unquote. They feel that they may have empowered unduly the Qataris and the Turks, perhaps even Egypt. They're upset with Egypt because Egypt won't force or won't allow Palestinians to be forced into the Sinai Desert. And therefore, given the pre-existing tensions between Egypt and Ethiopia over the Ethiopia building the Grand Renaissance Dam, which Egypt sees as a threat to its lifeblood, speaking of the Nile, Israel might try to curry favor with Ethiopia in order to draw blood from Egypt.
Mm-hmm. We've run out of time, sir, and so we will have to, we'll continue this. This is, as they say, to be continued.
Yes, sir. And I'm going back to the music of Mtume.
Mtume, juicy fruit. All right. And thank you very much.
Good luck.
And I would like to thank Melinda Francis and Lisa Watson.
We state these facts only to let you know that those of us who are revolutionary, Pan-Africanists, is not because we love revolution. It is historically determined, and we have no alternative but to follow history and to use history for the benefit of our people. Power, power, power.
to keep up.